The trading floor roared as alarms blared and ticker screens flashed red, each number burning into Michael Harrington's skull like a curse. Michael gripped the edge of his mahogany desk, his knuckles white, as Emma Clark rushed in with a folder clutched to her chest. Emma said, "The press already knows, Michael. The story broke 10 minutes ago." His jaw clenched and he whispered, "Who leaked it?" Daniel Brooks, seated silently near the back, tapped his pen against his notepad, eyes fixed on the chaos. The air was thick with panic. Assistants sprinted across the room, phones glued to their ears. Outside the glass wall, cameras swarmed the lobby. Michael muttered, "This empire will not burn because of lies," but his voice betrayed the fracture. Daniel leaned forward slightly, his tone low but sharp. "Sometimes the truth is darker than the lies you fear." The moment cracked open like glass, the storm surging with no escape. The lobby echoed with shouts as reporters pushed against the glass doors, microphones raised like weapons. Security guards struggled to hold the line, their radios crackling. Michael strode in with Emma close behind, his tailored suit now soaked with sweat despite the cool rain outside. Emma whispered, "They smell blood, Michael. You need to speak before Adrian controls the story." Michael's glare froze her. He snapped, "Adrian feeds on weakness. I will not bow to him." Daniel, standing unnoticed near the elevators, watched the storm unfold, his lips tightening at the hypocrisy. Cameras flashed, voices overlapped in a frenzy, and the empire's glass facade seemed ready to shatter. The storm outside bled into the storm within. In the boardroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Screens glowed with plummeting graphs, and shareholders shouted over one another. Michael stood at the head of the table, sweat glistening on his forehead, his voice rising above the chaos. "This company will not collapse because of lies." Emma placed a hand on his arm, whispering, "You're losing them. You need proof, not rage." He shook her off, his voice cracking with fury. Daniel, seated in the corner as a silent observer, scribbled notes with mechanical precision. His pen underlined one word over and over: truth. The air felt thick with betrayal, the walls of power trembling. Michael retreated to his office, pacing like a caged predator. The rain outside lashed the windows, thunder rumbling in sync with his heartbeat. Emma pressed him to issue a statement, her voice urgent. "Silence is surrender, Michael. Adrian will seize this moment." He wheeled on her, shouting, "Every word is a weapon, and I will not hand him the blade." Daniel entered quietly, slipping a document onto the desk. "Perhaps the blade has already been handed," he said. Michael froze, staring at the papers. The silence stretched, heavier than any storm. The building's power flickered, plunging the office briefly into darkness before emergency lights glowed red. A collective gasp rippled through the staff. Michael stood rigid, his silhouette framed by lightning outside the window. "They want me destroyed," he said, his voice echoing. Emma murmured, "Then fight harder." Daniel's eyes glinted as he whispered to himself, "Or let the truth finish what ambition began." The storm outside roared, as if it had been summoned by betrayal itself. In that moment it was clear. The empire was bleeding, and the wounds had only begun to open. The boardroom was suffocating under the weight of anger. Shareholders shouted, veins bulging, as the falling stock numbers glared from the giant screen. Michael Harrington slammed his palm down, his voice cutting through the uproar. "Silence. You will hear me." Emma Clark leaned closer, whispering with urgency, "They want blood, Michael. Give them reassurance, not fury." His glare burned holes through her. Adrian Cole, the rival CEO, appeared on the news broadcast at the far end of the room, his smug grin like gasoline on fire. "Your empire is rotten," Adrian said, his voice dripping venom. The words made Michael's chest tighten. Daniel Brooks sat quietly, scribbling notes as chaos raged, his pen scratching the word betrayal, a reminder that truth was already bleeding through cracks. Outside the boardroom, the hallways buzzed with panic. Assistants rushed with armfuls of files, their voices overlapping with panicked phone calls. Michael strode through the chaos, Emma trailing at his side, her words sharp. You need allies, not enemies. He shot back. Allies vanish when fire starts. His footsteps echoed like thunder across the marble floor. Daniel lingered near a pillar, watching the storm build, his eyes flickering toward the security monitors, where Adrian was already speaking to the press. Daniel whispered under his breath, "He's not the only one watching." Lightning flashed outside the windows, reflecting fractured shadows across the corporate temple, as if the building itself knew its foundations were crumbling. The press conference room pulsed with heat and noise as reporters crammed shoulder to shoulder. Michael stepped onto the stage, sweat glistening under blinding lights. Emma whispered, "Careful. One wrong word, and it's over." He adjusted his tie, forcing confidence into his stance. Flashes from cameras exploded like gunfire. A reporter shouted, "Is it true your empire was built on fraud?" The question hit like a blade. Michael's lips parted, but before he could answer, Daniel, standing at the back of the crowd, scribbled in his notepad, "Silence." Michael raised his chin and declared, "This company stands unbroken." The lie hung heavy, choking the air, while Adrian's smirk appeared live on monitors across the room. Daniel's pen pressed harder, underlining the truth hidden in shadows. After the press conference, the executive lounge felt like a battlefield disguised in velvet. Michael slumped into a leather chair, his glass of whiskey trembling in hand. Emma paced, snapping, "You lied to their faces, Michael. That lie will not hold." He snarled, "Truth is poison, Emma. Lies are armor." The fire crackled in the background, mocking the heat between them. Daniel entered quietly, slipping into a seat at the far edge, his voice soft but sharp. "Armor cracks, poison spreads." Michael's gaze shot toward him, suspicion sharpening, but Daniel looked away, his eyes fixed on the flames. The silence that followed was more damning than any headline. The Empire's rot was no longer invisible. It was breathing in the room. The rooftop offered little peace as wind howled, carrying the scent of rain. Michael stood at the edge, staring down at the glittering city lights, chest heaving. Emma clutched his arm, whispering, "They will destroy you if you don't fight back smarter." He shook her hand off, growling, "I will crush them before they bury me." Daniel, standing a few steps behind, looked past the skyline, his words almost swallowed by the wind. "Empires don't collapse from outside attacks, Michael. They collapse from within." Michael spun, eyes blazing. But Daniel's calm expression didn't flinch. Thunder rumbled, lightning slicing the sky, as if the city itself was bearing witness to a war of ambition spiraling out of control. The late-night board meeting reeked of desperation. Michael Harrington's voice thundered across the room, but every word was drowned by suspicion. Emma Clark leaned forward, her tone calm but sharp. "They're losing faith, Michael. You need me more than ever." He narrowed his eyes, sensing an undertone of power in her words. Around the table, shareholders exchanged glances, their loyalty unraveling like frayed rope. Adrian Cole's image flickered on the screen again, feeding poison into the cracks. Daniel Brooks sat at the far end, silently observing Emma's subtle smirk. In that moment, Michael felt a chill. The betrayal was no longer a question but a certainty creeping closer with every breath. In the corridor outside, Michael confronted Emma, his voice sharp with rage. "You've been feeding Adrian, haven't you?" Her eyes flashed, but she smiled coolly. "I've been protecting myself. You're dragging us all down." His fists tightened, veins bulging against his skin. Emma's calmness was more dangerous than anger, each word a dagger. Daniel watched from a distance, hidden in the shadows, his heart pounding as the cracks widened. "So, this is how empires fall," he murmured to himself. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, the hallway suddenly feeling like a battleground stripped of pretense, where betrayal had finally stepped into the open. Richard Hale, the former CEO, sat in his dim study, leather-bound books looming behind him. Michael arrived, his expression a mix of desperation and fury. Richard shook his head slowly, voice gravelly with regret. "Ambition eats its own, Michael. I warned you years ago." Michael growled, "Emma betrayed me. Adrian is circling like a vulture. I won't lose everything. Richard leaned closer, eyes heavy with sorrow. You've already lost what matters. Power always exacts its price. Michael's hands trembled as he poured a drink, whiskey sloshing onto the desk. Daniel, who had followed quietly, absorbed every word, his resolve deepening. Betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was an inheritance. The next morning the lobby erupted with whispers as leaked documents hit the press. Reporters shouted questions, their voices echoing off marble walls. Emma walked confidently past the chaos, her expression cool as steel. Michael stormed behind her, rage cracking his voice. You did this! You fed them the files! She turned sharply, her eyes gleaming with defiance. Maybe the world deserves to know. Gasps spread through the crowd as cameras snapped the confrontation. Daniel stood at the fringe, watching carefully, his mind already calculating the ripple effect. He scribbled 2 words in his notebook. Truth wins. The betrayal was no longer private. It had become spectacle. That night, Michael stood alone in his office, staring at the skyline lit by lightning. His empire felt like sand slipping through his fingers. Study with my wife. Emma had torn open the walls, Adrian was circling closer, and Richard's warnings echoed like ghosts. He whispered, I built this with blood. I will not die here. Behind him, Daniel stepped forward from the shadows, his voice calm and cutting. Sometimes the truth is the only executioner. Michael turned, rage and fear flashing in his eyes, but Daniel didn't move. Outside, the storm roared louder, as if the city itself demanded judgment. Cost of betrayal had come due. Michael Harrington paced the empty executive floor, the hum of servers and distant city traffic filling the silence. Emma Clark leaned against a glass partition, her expression unreadable. You can't see them, Michael, but they are moving, she said, her voice low. Michael's eyes narrowed, fists clenching. Who is pulling the strings now? Outside the window, the skyline glimmered under a restless dusk. Daniel Brooks stood silently near the elevators, arms folded, watching every flicker of motion on security monitors. Some of the enemies wear familiar faces, he murmured, his tone steady. Michael's gaze hardened. The battle was no longer visible. Shadows were weaving the next strike, and he had to anticipate every move before the empire crumbled completely. A coded email appeared on Daniel's laptop, the sender hidden, the contents chilling, proof of internal sabotage. He frowned, fingers hovering over the keys. Michael entered, eyes burning, asking, What is it? Daniel glanced up, voice steady. It's bigger than Adrian. Someone inside is feeding him everything. Michael slammed his hand on the desk, his pulse racing. Emma? No. It can't be her, he muttered. Emma watched quietly, expression unreadable, lips pressed tight. The building seemed to pulse with tension as Daniel continued. The empire is riddled with spies. Every choice you make is being mirrored. Lightning flickered across the skyline outside, echoing the storm within the walls of power. Victoria Lang, the shadow investor, appeared unexpectedly in a conference call, her image crisp on a giant screen. Michael's eyes widened. You're behind this? He demanded. Her lips curved into a subtle smile. I prefer to call it guidance, she said, her tone calm and deliberate. Daniel scribbled notes, recognizing the unseen hand shaping every crisis. Emma shifted uneasily, her allegiance unclear. Victoria's presence exuded control. The empire's strings were in her hands, invisible yet iron-tight. Michael's jaw tightened. Then I have to fight smarter or it's over, he muttered. Daniel's gaze lingered on Victoria's screen, calculating, noting every flicker, every micro-expression. The battlefield had grown silent but lethal. Late evening, the corporate lab hummed with hidden cameras and monitors. Daniel tracked internal communications, uncovering a corporate spy feeding Adrian Cole insider information. Michael stormed in, voice shaking. Who dares? Daniel's tone was calm yet cutting. Someone trusted, feeding your enemies every step. Michael's face paled as realization hit. Betrayal ran deeper than anticipated. Emma stepped back, expression tight, lips pressed, eyes darting between them. Outside, the city lights twinkled innocently, belying the war inside. Daniel's fingers flew over the keyboard, piecing together identities. "Every shadow matters," he whispered. Michael's empire was no longer a fortress. It was a maze of hidden knives. The penthouse overlooking the city felt colder than the night wind. Michael stared down at the glittering metropolis, heartbeat hammering, realizing how invisible forces manipulated every move. Daniel stepped closer, calm, voice cutting through the silence. "They aren't just threats outside the walls, they live within them." Michael turned, eyes blazing, searching for allies, but saw only questions reflected in Emma's guarded gaze. Victoria's presence lingered, omnipresent in the mind, orchestrating each step. The storm outside roared, rain slamming against glass, mirroring the turmoil inside. Michael's empire was no longer built on steel and ambition. It teetered on secrets, shadows, and unseen hands. Daniel Brooks stepped into the dim office, his gaze sharp and purposeful. The chaos of Michael's empire was evident in scattered reports and glowing monitors. He approached a terminal, fingers hovering above the keyboard, whispering, "Time to reveal what's been hidden." Michael Harrington paced behind him, anger simmering. "What are you doing, Daniel?" he demanded, voice low and threatening. Daniel didn't flinch. "Correcting the balance," he replied, tapping a file that exposed internal corruption. Emma Clark watched silently, lips pressed, calculating whether to intervene. Adrian Cole's image appeared on a live feed, smug and opportunistic. The quiet confidence of the underdog shifted the room's energy. The scales of power were starting to tilt. Daniel uploaded evidence to secure networks, watching stock tickers and internal memos align with his strategy. Michael's frustration escalated, fists slamming the desk. "You can't just rewrite the rules," he shouted. Daniel's voice remained steady. "Rules exist to be exposed when power blinds judgment." Emma stepped closer, conflicted, whispering, "Are you sure about this?" Daniel's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Every empire has its cracks. This is the moment to widen them." Lightning flashed outside, highlighting the city's skyline and casting long shadows across the office. The underdog was no longer invisible. The first moves of a calculated upheaval were in motion. In the boardroom, Michael tried to rally loyal executives, but whispers of Daniel's moves had spread. Adrian Cole appeared on live feed, announcing minor shifts in stock, using the chaos to his advantage. Michael slammed his palm down, voice raw, "Stop them. Every piece of information they leak is poison." Daniel remained calm, standing at the back, pen poised over his notebook. Emma glanced at him, uncertainty flashing in her eyes. Daniel's words were quiet but lethal. "An empire's strength is only as strong as its weakest link. Watch the walls crumble." Michael realized the underdog was already pulling the strings from the shadows, orchestrating the inevitable. Daniel coordinated leaks and internal alerts with precision. Each message exposed another layer of corruption, widening cracks in the empire. Michael's frustration boiled over, hair slightly disheveled, his voice shaking. "This ends now. You can't control everything." Daniel's calm reply cut through the tension. "I control nothing except the truth, Michael. The rest will follow." Emma whispered under her breath, torn between loyalty and survival. "Hayes changing the rules. Maybe it's time we follow him." The room was electric with anticipation. The underdog now a pivot point for everyone's fate. The empire's foundation trembling with every keystroke. On the rooftop helipad, wind swept cold over Michael's shoulders. The city glimmered below, oblivious to the upheaval above. Daniel approached calmly, hands tucked in pockets, voice cutting through the roar of wind. "Every empire can fall from within, Michael. Yours is no exception." Michael glared, chest heaving, but recognized the inevitability in Daniel's stance. Emma lingered behind, expression unreadable, silently measuring which side would hold power. The storm above mirrored the storm of strategy below. Daniel had risen from shadows to become a pivot no one could ignore, reshaping the battle for control with subtle but lethal precision. The boardroom was a war zone. Michael Harrington stood at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes burning with desperation. Adrian Cole appeared on the large screen, smug and triumphant. "Your time ends tonight, Michael," he said. Emma Clark shifted uneasily beside Michael, whispering, "You need allies now, not fury." Michael clenched his fists, voice low and sharp. "Every move I've made has been calculated. I will not yield." Daniel Brooks, standing at the corner, observed silently, notebook in hand, a calm but deadly presence. Every glance, every micro-expression was a weapon. The Empire was collapsing, yet the final moves of power had only begun, and no one could predict who would survive the storm of ambition. Michael's phone buzzed relentlessly with urgent calls and messages from panicked executives. I'm ready to move. Item time. Each notification felt like a hammer striking the foundation of his control. Emma whispered, "Adrian is moving faster than we can anticipate." Michael slammed the phone down, fury and fear blending in his gaze. "I will not be undone by shadows," he growled. Daniel leaned slightly forward, fingers hovering over notes, voice steady. "Sometimes shadows define the battlefield, not light. Watch and react wisely." The room's atmosphere crackled with tension, every heartbeat echoing through polished walls as the Empire teetered on the edge, waiting for the decisive strike that would determine who survived. The trading floor below erupted as Daniel executed a final series of internal exposures. Screens flashed red as stock values shifted violently. Michael's face tightened, muscles twitching with panic and rage. "Stop this, you don't know what you're unleashing." Daniel remained still, voice steady. "I know exactly what the Empire is hiding." Emma turned, realizing loyalty had shifted, her hands trembling slightly. Adrian's image on live feed grinned wider, sensing victory. Michael's empire was fracturing, each crack widening as Daniel's calculated moves destabilized the entire network. The apex of tension had arrived. Every decision now held irreversible consequences. Michael confronted Emma privately, voice breaking. "You were supposed to stand by me." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I stand by truth, Michael. You've lost your way." His rage flared, fists striking the desk, papers flying. Daniel's eyes scanned the room, calculating, measuring every reaction. "Power is fleeting. Only control over truth lasts," he murmured. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room with stark white brilliance, shadows dancing across determined faces. The Empire was burning from within. No strategy, no force could halt the collapse now. Every heartbeat, every breath carried the weight of irreversible betrayal. The final confrontation unfolded on the rooftop helipad, wind lashing around the skyscraper. Michael stood at the edge, chest heaving, adrenaline and fear intermingling. Daniel stepped closer, calm and unyielding. "Every empire has its reckoning. Yours is now." Michael's glare softened, recognition flickering in his eyes. Emma remained slightly behind, tension coiled like a spring. Lightning illuminated the city below, reflecting in puddles on the helipad. The storm above mirrored the storm of ambition. The Empire's collapse was imminent, and every player understood the cost. The apex of power had arrived, and only the decisive act would reveal who survived. The press conference hall was electric with anticipation. Daniel Brooks stood at the podium, a calm authority radiating from him as cameras clicked and flashes erupted. "The empire you trusted is built on deception," he declared, voice clear and unwavering. Michael Harrington sat rigid in the front row, fury and disbelief etched on his face. Emma Clark's expression was unreadable, lips pressed tight. Adrian Cole's live feed captured every word, his smugness fading slightly as the weight of revelation sank in. Richard Hale, watching from a private room, murmured, "Finally, the truth surfaces." The crowd absorbed each word, stunned as the jaded employee revealed every hidden betrayal. The Empire's cracks now laid bare for the world to see. Outside, The city hummed as news tickers flashed headlines of scandal. Michael stormed down the corridor, his fury barely contained, muttering, "I will rebuild. They will pay for this." Emma fell in step behind him, her face neutral but calculating. Daniel walked calmly through the same halls, notebook in hand, observing the chaos he had orchestrated. "Power always tests the truth, Michael. Tonight proves it," he whispered. Lightning from a distant storm lit the sky, casting elongated shadows across polished floors. The Empire's collapse was no longer speculation. It was a spectacle of consequences, unfolding with precision as the jaded employee reshaped the rules of survival. In the executive lounge, Michael confronted Emma, desperation creeping into his voice. "You could have stopped him." Emma met his glare, voice steady. "I stopped nothing. I just survived." Daniel entered quietly, his presence commanding attention without a word. Michael's shoulders sagged briefly, acknowledging the inevitability. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city lights sparkled indifferently, a stark reminder that ambition was transient. Daniel flipped through his notes, each page detailing betrayal, sabotage, and the true cost of empire building. The air felt heavy with judgment, the silence punctuated only by the faint hum of electronics. Tonight, the Empire's collapse had a face, and it walked quietly among the ruins. The helipad atop the skyscraper gleamed under floodlights, rain slicking the concrete surface. Michael paced at the edge, storm winds tugging at his suit. Daniel approached, calm and resolute. "The Empire falls not because of enemies outside, but because of truths inside." Michael's gaze met his, fury mixed with reluctant respect. Emma lingered slightly behind, silent, observing both men. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the city below, reflecting off puddles, mirrors of chaos above. Daniel's calm presence contrasted the tempest surrounding them, each step deliberate, measured, as the jaded employee completed the final orchestration of power and consequence. The final moment hung heavy in the air. Daniel stepped forward, eyes scanning the city below, voice low. "History remembers those who face truth, Michael. Tonight is yours." Michael's chest rose and fell rapidly, the weight of his choices evident. Emma's lips pressed tight, watching both men, uncertain where loyalty now lay. Outside, the storm began to recede, clouds parting as dawn crept over the horizon. The Empire, once a towering monument to ambition, lay fractured, exposed, and redefined. Daniel walked away from the chaos, the jaded employee who had exposed the darkness now carrying the weight of justice, leaving behind a world forever changed.